medianoche una, joven Apache con un girón de tela pidió refugio, y el cambio su vida /. The moon hung high in the sky, casting a soft silver light that made everything look calm and still. John sat inside his small wooden cabin, the warm glow of the fire illuminating the rough walls and the simple furniture. He had lived here alone for many years. Life on the edge of the desert was quiet, sometimes too quiet. Most days he worked hard on his land, tending to the animals and fixing fences. But nights like this, when the wind blew strong and the darkness seemed endless, he often felt the deep weight of loneliness pressing on his chest. He was used to the silence. He liked it in many ways. It gave him time to think, to remember, to be alone with his thoughts. But sometimes the quiet could feel empty, like the world had forgotten him. That night he was staring into the flames, thinking about how life had become predictable and routine. The fire crackled and popped, sending tiny sparks into the air. Outside, the wind moaned through the trees and the desert seemed vast and endless. Suddenly, a soft sound reached his ears. It was faint at first, almost like a whisper carried by the wind, but it was real. A light knock on the door. John froze. He rarely had visitors. The last time someone came by was weeks ago, and even then it was just a neighbor passing by on horseback. Another knock, slightly louder this time. Someone was at the door. John rose slowly, his boots making soft thuds on the wooden floor. He walked to the door and opened it carefully. The cold night air rushed in, carrying the scent of sand and dust. Standing there in the dim moonlight was a young woman. She was thin, her clothes torn and covered in dust. A small piece of cloth wrapped around her shoulders barely kept her warm. Her hair was tangled and her eyes were wide, filled with fear and uncertainty. John took a step back, startled by the unexpected visitor. The young woman looked at him with a mixture of hope and nervousness. "Please," she said softly, her voice trembling, "may I stay here tonight? I have nowhere else to go." John hesitated. It was unusual for anyone to travel through this area at night, especially alone. Yet there was something in her eyes that made him pause, a kind of quiet determination mixed with vulnerability. He noticed the way she clutched her thin cloth tightly around her shoulders, as if it were the only protection she had. "Come in," he finally said, stepping aside. "You can stay for the night." She moved quickly inside, grateful and almost relieved. John closed the door behind her, and the warmth of the cabin embraced her like a soft blanket. She shivered and rubbed her arms, trying to shake off the chill. John guided her to a small chair near the fire. Her eyes followed the flames, and for a moment she seemed lost in thought, as if trying to remember a world far away from this quiet desert cabin. John watched her silently. He had seen many things in his life, but there was something different about her. She did not speak much, but her presence alone told a story. He could sense her fear, her exhaustion, and her courage. She had traveled a long way to reach here, and it was clear she had faced many challenges along the way. He brought her a blanket and wrapped it around her shoulders. "You must be very cold," he said. "You should warm yourself by the fire." She nodded, her lips pressed together. "Thank you," she whispered. Her voice was soft but steady, and John felt a strange connection to this stranger who had appeared in his life so suddenly. For a few minutes, they sat in silence. The fire crackled, filling the room with its warm, golden light. Outside, the wind continued to blow, carrying the lonely sounds of the desert. Inside, there was a quiet peace, a fragile calm that felt almost magical. John realized that this simple moment, sharing warmth and shelter with someone in need, was something he had not experienced in a long time. Finally, she spoke again. "I am sorry for disturbing you. I didn't mean to come uninvited." "You are not disturbing me," John replied. "It's late and you needed help, that's all that matters." She looked down at her hands, clutching the thin cloth tighter. "I don't know where I am going," she said. I had nowhere else to go." John nodded slowly. He understood that feeling. He had been alone for years. sometimes wondering if anyone would ever care about him or notice his existence. Now, he realized that life could surprise him in unexpected ways. This young woman appearing at his door in the dead of night had brought with her a new sense of purpose, even if he did not fully understand it yet. "Sit," he said gently. "Rest for tonight. Tomorrow we will figure out what to do next." She obeyed, sinking into the chair and letting the warmth of the fire seep into her cold bones. Her eyes reflected the flickering flames, and for the first time, John noticed a quiet strength within her. She had traveled alone, through the darkness and danger, and still stood before him, asking only for help. As the night grew deeper, John made her a small meal. They ate in silence, the sounds of the desert outside mixing with the quiet crackling of the fire. Every now and then she would glance at him, and he would return a kind, reassuring look. There was no need for words to explain the trust that was slowly building between them. Hours passed, and the wind outside grew colder. The young woman eventually leaned back, exhausted, her eyes heavy with sleep. John watched her carefully. She reminded him of someone vulnerable yet strong, someone who had faced the world with courage despite fear. He realized that this night, which had begun like any other, was already changing him in ways he could not yet describe. He thought about the future. He did not know what would happen tomorrow or the day after. He did not know where she had come from or where she would go. But he knew that for now he could offer her safety, warmth, and shelter. And in doing so, he felt something stirring in his heart, a feeling he had not felt in years: hope. The young woman finally closed her eyes, drifting into a peaceful sleep. The moon continued to shine over the desert, silent and bright. And John, sitting by the fire, felt a quiet sense of purpose take root. He understood in that moment that sometimes life brings unexpected visitors to our door, not just to test us, but to change us, to remind us of our own humanity. That night, the desert was still. The wind whispered gently, carrying secrets and stories across the empty land. Inside the small cabin, two lives had crossed paths in the most unlikely way. A simple act of kindness, a door opened in the dark, had created a connection that would shape both their futures. John knew that he had made a choice to help, to care, to welcome someone in need. And he sensed, deep down, that this choice would lead him to a life richer and fuller than the quiet, lonely one he had known before. As the fire burned low and the shadows danced on the walls, John silently vowed to protect this young woman for as long as she needed. And though he did not yet understand the full impact of her arrival, he felt that, somehow, she had come to change his life forever. The desert night continued, calm and endless, but inside the small cabin, warmth and hope had taken root. For the first time in a long time, John felt that life was about more than work and solitude. It was about connection, compassion, and the small, brave acts that can transform ordinary nights into unforgettable beginnings. The next morning, the desert was bathed in the soft, golden light of dawn. The sun rose slowly, painting the sand and rocks in warm hues of orange and pink. John woke to the sound of birds calling in the distance and the gentle rustling of the wind through the sparse trees outside. The young woman was already awake, sitting near the fire, her hands wrapped around a cup of water. She seemed quieter now, less frightened, but her eyes still held the traces of a long and difficult journey. John stepped out of his small bedroom, stretching and shaking off the stiffness from the night. He noticed how carefully she was holding herself, as if each movement required thought and courage. He poured himself some coffee and sat near her, giving her a small, reassuring smile. She looked up at him and returned the gesture, a faint smile appearing on her lips. There was an unspoken understanding between them. No words could fully explain the bond that had begun to form. "You slept well?" John asked gently. She nodded, though she did not speak at first. Then, after a pause, she said softly, I think so. Thank you for letting me stay." "I don't know what I would have done last night if you hadn't opened the door." John nodded slowly, his eyes thoughtful. You don't need to thank me. Everyone needs help sometimes. Everyone needs a safe place, even if just for a night. She took a deep breath, then spoke again, her voice trembling slightly. I ran away from my village. Things were difficult there. I had no choice but to leave. I had to find somewhere I could be safe. John listened carefully. He could hear the fear and pain behind her words, but also a quiet strength. She had made a brave decision to leave behind everything familiar, venturing into the unknown for her own safety. He admired that courage, even if he did not fully understand the dangers she had faced. Tell me about it, he said gently. If you want to, only if you want. The young woman hesitated, her eyes downcast. Then she slowly began to speak, her words soft but filled with emotion. She told him about her home, a small village where life was often harsh and unfair. She spoke of people who did not understand her, of expectations that felt impossible to meet, and of the fear that had grown inside her over time. She described the nights when she could not sleep, thinking about the future and wondering if anyone would ever care for her or listen to her story. John listened silently, absorbing every word. He did not interrupt. He realized that her journey had been lonely and painful, but it had also shaped her into someone strong and determined. Each word she spoke revealed not just her suffering, but also her resilience. She had endured hardships that many could not imagine, and yet she had made it to his door, asking only for a moment of safety and understanding. As she spoke, John thought about his own life. He had faced challenges too, of course, but they were different. His struggles had been quiet and solitary, mostly about survival and routine. Listening to her story made him see life from a new perspective. He realized that he had become so absorbed in his own world that he had forgotten about the stories and struggles of others. This young woman had reminded him that there was a larger world beyond his cabin and the desert around it. She paused, looking into the fire, and John noticed a flicker of sadness in her eyes. I was scared, she admitted. I didn't know if I would make it here. I didn't know if anyone would help me, if anyone would care. John reached out and offered a comforting hand on hers. It's okay to be scared, he said. You are safe here, at least for now. You are not alone anymore. Her eyes softened and she gave a small, grateful smile. That moment, simple as it was, created a sense of trust between them. John realized that offering help was not just about giving shelter. It was about listening, understanding, and showing kindness when someone needed it most. After a while, they sat together in silence, the fire crackling and the sunlight gradually filling the cabin. The young woman seemed more relaxed now, but John could tell that the weight of her journey was still on her shoulders. He wanted to help her, but he knew he could not solve all her problems at once. He only had to be there to offer support and to let her know that she was not alone in this vast world. I don't even know your name, John said gently, breaking the silence. She looked at him and hesitated, then said softly, My name is Ida. John smiled. It's a beautiful name. Mine is John. They shook hands, a simple gesture that somehow carried more meaning than words. It was a promise of trust, a silent agreement that they would help each other navigate the uncertain path ahead. As the morning continued, John prepared a simple breakfast of bread, eggs, and coffee. Ida ate quietly, still lost in her thoughts, but she seemed to find some comfort in the routine of the morning. John noticed that she looked around the cabin with curiosity, observing the small details, the worn furniture, the old tools he had collected over the years. She seemed to appreciate the simplicity of his life, and perhaps it reminded her that even in hardship, there could be moments of peace and stability. Once breakfast was done, John suggested they step outside for some fresh air. The desert was alive in the morning light, with shadows stretching long and the wind carrying the scent of dry earth and wild plants. They walked together, not speaking much, but sharing the quiet presence of each other. It was a peaceful moment, one that allowed both of them to reflect and to begin building a connection based on trust and respect. Aita finally spoke again, her voice steady now. "I don't know what the future holds. I don't know where I will go or what I will do. But coming here, it feels like a small miracle. Someone listened to me. Someone cared." John nodded, feeling a warmth in his heart that he had not felt in years. "Sometimes the smallest acts can make the biggest difference," he said. "Opening a door, listening to a story, offering help. It may seem small, but it can change lives." Aida smiled, a faint but genuine smile, and John realized that her presence had already begun to change him. He felt a sense of purpose stirring inside, a realization that life could be richer and fuller when shared with others. Her courage and determination had inspired him to look beyond his own solitude, to consider the impact he could have on the lives of others. As the sun climbed higher, they returned to the cabin. John began to tell Aida about his life, his work on the ranch, and the quiet days he had spent alone. He spoke honestly, sharing both the challenges and the simple joys he had experienced. Aida listened intently, asking questions and showing interest. In that exchange, they both began to see the value of companionship and understanding, and how even strangers could create a bond that felt meaningful and real. By midday, they had formed a quiet rhythm, sharing tasks and conversation, learning from each other. John helped Aida wash some of the dirt from her clothes and hair, and she, in turn, offered to assist with small chores around the cabin. Each action was small, ordinary, but it built a sense of trust and partnership. It was clear that the beginning of their relationship was rooted in mutual respect and empathy, and that both of them were learning from the experience. As the day went on, Aida shared more stories about her journey, the challenges she had faced, and the moments of fear and uncertainty. John listened, sometimes offering advice, sometimes simply nodding in understanding. Through her words, he saw a world he had never fully known, filled with struggles and triumphs that existed beyond the boundaries of his quiet desert life. By evening, both felt a sense of accomplishment and comfort. The long, quiet day had brought them closer, not just as strangers who had met by chance, but as two people beginning to trust and care for each other. Aida's presence had opened John's eyes to the realities and beauty of life beyond his cabin, and he knew that he would never see his world in the same way again. As night fell once more, they sat together by the fire. Aida's eyes reflected the flickering flames, and John saw the strength and courage that had carried her to this place. He understood that helping her was not just an act of kindness, but an opportunity to learn, to grow, and to connect with another human being on a deep and meaningful level. That night, the cabin was filled with warmth and a quiet sense of hope. Both John and Aida felt that something important had begun, something that could change their lives forever. They had met by chance, but the impact of that meeting would ripple through the days to come, shaping their decisions, their actions, and their understanding of the world around them. For John, it was a reminder that life could surprise you in unexpected ways, and that the smallest act of kindness could lead to profound change. For Aida, it was proof that even in the darkest moments, there could be safety, compassion, and hope. Together, they faced the unknown, ready to navigate whatever challenges lay ahead, supported by the bond they had begun to build in the quiet hours of a desert morning. The days that followed Aida's arrival brought change to John's life in ways he had never expected. The quiet routine of his cabin and ranch, once predictable and solitary, began to shift with her presence. Aida's courage and determination were like a gentle wind that stirred something deep inside him, a desire to connect, to care, and to make a difference. He had always lived alone, focusing on his work and survival, but now he began to see life from a new perspective. In the mornings, they worked together around the cabin. John showed Aida how to tend to the small garden he had started, how to care for the chickens and goats, and how to repair fences that had been worn by the desert wind. She learned quickly, her hands deft and careful, her attention to detail impressive. John was surprised by her eagerness to help, and her ability to adapt to a life so different from the one she had left behind. It reminded him that strength often came in quiet ways, through resilience, determination, and a willingness to learn. Aida, in turn, shared stories of her culture and traditions. She spoke about her village, the customs, and the ways her people respected the land and the animals. John listened intently, fascinated by her knowledge and the beauty of her perspective. He realized that life was richer when different experiences and stories were shared, and he felt grateful for the chance to learn from someone so brave and insightful. One morning, as the sun rose over the desert, John and Aida sat outside, drinking water and watching the light spread across the sand. Aida spoke softly, almost to herself, about the challenges she had faced before coming to the cabin. She spoke of the fear she had felt when leaving her village, of the nights she had spent walking through the desert alone, unsure if she would survive. John listened quietly, his heart heavy with empathy. He could not imagine the courage it had taken for her to make such a journey. "You are stronger than you realize," John said finally. "You have faced so much, and yet you are still here. That takes more courage than most people ever show." Aida looked at him, her eyes reflecting the morning sunlight. "I don't know if I am strong," she said softly. "I was just trying to survive. I didn't have a choice." John smiled gently. "Strength isn't always about choice. Sometimes it's about enduring, about facing what comes and finding a way through. You've done that, and that makes you strong." As the days passed, John began to notice changes in himself as well. The loneliness that had once been a constant companion no longer weighed on him as heavily. He found joy in small things, sharing meals, listening to Aida's stories, and seeing her laugh at small jokes or moments of curiosity. The cabin, once silent and still, now felt alive. The presence of another person, someone who needed him and whose life he cared about, gave him a sense of purpose he had not felt in years. John also began to interact more with the nearby community. Inspired by Aida's experiences and the strength she had shown in seeking help, he started to offer assistance to others who might need it. He repaired fences for neighbors, helped with chores for those who were elderly, and offered guidance to anyone who asked. Slowly, his small ranch became a place of connection, a hub of quiet support in the desert. Aida's influence was evident in every action John took. She had shown him that helping others, listening to their stories, and offering support could transform lives, not just the lives of those being helped, but the helper as well. He realized that life's value was measured not only in survival, but in compassion, empathy, and the relationships we build along the way. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in shades of pink and purple, Aida and John sat outside the cabin. The desert was calm, the only sounds the rustling of the wind and the occasional call of a bird. Aida leaned back on the sand, looking at the sky. "I never imagined I could feel safe again," she said softly. "After everything I went through, I thought life would always be about fear and running, but here I feel hope." John watched her, his heart swelling with a mix of pride and humility. "You deserve to feel safe," he said gently. "Everyone deserves that. And sometimes it takes finding the right people, the right place, to discover that hope again." Her eyes met his, and for a moment there was a silent understanding between them. They had both been changed by their meeting. She had found shelter and compassion, and he had found purpose and connection. The bond they shared was growing stronger, built not only on necessity but on mutual respect and care. Over the following weeks, John and Aida worked to make the ranch more than just a place to live. They planted more vegetables, repaired old tools, and organized a small area where travelers or those in need could rest for a night or two. John realized that by opening his heart and his home, he could extend the same kindness he had shown Aida to others who needed help. Each visitor who came to the ranch reminded him that life was not meant to be lived in isolation, and that small acts of generosity could ripple outward in ways he had never imagined. Aida, too, thrived in this environment. The skills she learned from John allowed her to feel capable and confident, and she began to help others who came to the ranch with questions, requests, or needs. Her presence became a source of comfort and guidance for newcomers, and John watched with admiration as she stepped into a role of quiet leadership. She had grown from a frightened young woman seeking refuge into someone who could inspire and support others. One afternoon, a neighbor brought news of a family struggling to repair their home after a recent storm. John and Aida quickly organized supplies and offered assistance. Together, they worked for hours, lifting boards, repairing fences, and rebuilding what had been damaged. By evening, the family's home was restored, and the gratitude in their eyes reminded John of the power of action. Aida smiled, her eyes shining with satisfaction, knowing she had helped someone else find safety and comfort just as she had found it. Through these experiences, John realized that his life had been transformed. He was no longer just a solitary man living on the edge of the desert. He was part of a larger story, one that included helping, connecting, and caring for others. Aida's courage had ignited something inside him, and he embraced it fully, discovering a new sense of fulfillment in each day's work. Evenings became moments of reflection. As the sun set, John and Aida would sit by the fire, sharing stories, dreams, and memories. They laughed, sometimes cried, and always listened. In those quiet hours, the bond between them deepened, built on trust, shared experiences, and a growing understanding of life's fragility and beauty. John often marveled at how much had changed in such a short time. A chance encounter on a cold night had led to a friendship, a partnership, and a transformation of both their lives. He understood that life had a way of surprising those who were open to it, and that sometimes the people who appear at our doors are meant to guide us toward growth, compassion, and purpose. Aida, too, had found something she had long thought impossible: a place to belong, someone who cared for her, and the confidence to face the world with hope rather than fear. She had learned that courage was not just about survival, but about trusting others, taking risks, and embracing the unknown. John's presence in her life had given her a foundation from which she could grow, heal, and begin to dream of a future filled with possibility. As the nights passed, the cabin glowed with warmth, laughter, and quiet understanding. John no longer felt the heavy weight of loneliness. Aida no longer felt the constant fear that had haunted her journey. Together, they had created a space where life was richer, brighter, and full of meaning. John often thought back to the first night, when a young woman in torn clothes and trembling from fear had knocked on his door. He realized that small acts of kindness could have enormous consequences, shaping lives in ways no one could predict. That night had been the beginning of a journey, not just for Aida, but for him as well. It had opened his heart, inspired his actions, and transformed his understanding of life. Through the simple acts of sharing, helping, and listening, John and Aida had built something enduring. They had proven that compassion and courage, even in the smallest forms, could change lives, inspire hope, and create a sense of belonging. And as they looked toward the future, they knew that together they could face whatever challenges might come, strengthened by the bond they had formed, and guided by the lessons they had learned from one another. Life at the ranch continued, but it was not without challenges. John had grown accustomed to the quiet and predictable rhythm of his days, and even though Aida's presence had brought warmth, energy, and purpose, new challenges soon appeared. It was natural, he realized, that change would not come without obstacles, but he had learned that facing them together could make even the hardest days manageable. One morning, a letter arrived from a local government office. John unfolded it carefully, scanning the words with a frown. It seemed that some of the improvements he had made to the ranch, intended to help travelers and those in need, were causing concern among certain local authorities. They questioned whether his efforts were appropriate, suggesting that he could face penalties or restrictions. The letter left John uneasy. He had only wanted to help, yet now it seemed that his intentions might be misunderstood. Aida noticed his concern immediately. "What does it say?" she asked, her voice calm but firm. John handed her the letter. She read it quickly, her brow furrowed. "They don't understand what you're trying to do," she said finally. "You are helping people, giving them hope. That is what matters, not their rules or fear." John nodded, appreciating her perspective. Aida had a way of seeing through the confusion and fear that sometimes clouded judgment. Her words reminded him that doing the right thing was often more important than pleasing others. But he could not ignore the reality. Some people in the community were suspicious of outsiders, and even his neighbors questioned why he was offering help to those who were not part of their immediate circle. Over the following days, John encountered subtle resistance. A neighbor refused to let him borrow tools. Another questioned why he was helping travelers instead of focusing on his own ranch, and rumors began to spread. It was frustrating, but John did not let it deter him. He realized that his mission was not about earning approval, it was about doing what he believed was right, and Aida was there to remind him of that truth every step of the way. "She is right," Aida said one evening as they repaired a fence together. "You are not doing this for them. You are doing it because it is the right thing to do. That matters more than what anyone else thinks." John smiled. Her wisdom, despite her young age, had been a guide in more ways than he could count. He admired her courage, not only the courage to survive her own hardships, but the courage to speak honestly and stand firm in her convictions. Her presence had inspired him to face challenges with a clearer heart and mind. As the days passed, the ranch became a hub for people seeking guidance, comfort, or simply a moment of rest. Each visitor brought new lessons and new perspectives. Some came from nearby villages, while others traveled long distances, seeking help they could not find elsewhere. John and Aida worked together to provide shelter, food, and guidance, always striving to maintain respect and dignity for everyone who came through their doors. Yet, not every encounter was easy. Some visitors were frightened, angry, or distrustful. John had to learn patience, to listen without judgment, and to respond with empathy even when faced with suspicion or hostility. Aida often helped in these moments, her gentle voice and steady presence diffusing tension and building trust. She had learned from her own journey how fear and mistrust could shape people's behavior, and she used that knowledge to help others feel safe. One particularly difficult day, a young boy arrived at the ranch. He had been traveling alone, separated from his family, and his eyes were filled with fear. He would not speak at first, retreating into himself and refusing any assistance. John felt a pang of helplessness, unsure how to reach him. Aida knelt beside the boy, speaking softly and patiently, sharing a story of her own struggles and how she had found safety and hope. Slowly, the boy began to relax, allowing them to help him. John watched in awe as Aida guided him with kindness and understanding, seeing firsthand how empathy could transform even the most fearful heart. Through moments like these, John learned some of the most important lessons of his life. He realized that compassion was not always easy, and that helping others often required patience, courage, and perseverance. But he also understood that every effort was meaningful, that every act of kindness created ripples that could touch lives far beyond the ranch. Aida had shown him that strength came in many forms, not only physical strength, but the strength to be patient, to listen, and to care for those who had lost hope. John also faced personal challenges during this time. The responsibilities of maintaining the ranch, helping visitors, and navigating the distrust of some neighbors weighed heavily on him. There were nights when he felt exhausted, wondering if he could continue. But Aida's presence, her courage and optimism, reminded him why he had started this journey in the first place. Together, they found ways to share the workload, support one another, and stay motivated despite difficulties. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky in brilliant shades of gold and red, John and Aida sat quietly outside the cabin. The day had been long and filled with challenges, but there was a sense of accomplishment and satisfaction in the air. Aida looked at John, her expression thoughtful. "You have changed, John," she said softly. "You used to be so alone, so focused only on yourself. Now look at what you are doing. You are helping so many people. You are making a difference." John smiled, feeling a deep warmth in his chest. "I didn't do this alone," he replied. "I couldn't have done it without you. You reminded me that life is bigger than just surviving. It's about helping, connecting, and caring." Her eyes softened, and for a moment there was a quiet understanding between them. They had faced challenges together, learned from each other, and grown stronger as a result. The ranch was no longer just a place to live. It had become a place of learning, growth, and transformation, not only for those they helped but for themselves as well. Over time, the impact of their work began to be noticed by others. Some neighbors, initially skeptical, saw the positive changes and began to offer support. Supplies were shared, advice exchanged, and a sense of community slowly grew around the ranch. John realized that persistence and compassion could overcome fear and suspicion, and that the courage to act with integrity could inspire others to do the same. Aida, too, grew in confidence and purpose. She had faced fear and uncertainty in her own life, and now she was able to help others navigate theirs. Her experiences had taught her resilience, patience, and empathy, and she applied these qualities every day. She became a mentor, a guide, and a source of hope for those who visited the ranch. Through her actions, she demonstrated that even the smallest acts of kindness could have a profound impact, and that courage could be contagious. One particularly quiet night, after a long day of helping travelers and tending to the ranch, John and Aida sat together by the fire. The stars shone brightly above the desert, and a gentle breeze whispered through the trees. They reflected on all that had happened, the challenges they had faced, the people they had helped, and the lessons they had learned. There was a deep sense of fulfillment, a recognition that their work mattered and that they were making a difference in the world. John thought back to the first night Aida had arrived, trembling and uncertain, asking only for shelter. He realized that the journey they had begun together had transformed both their lives. Her courage had inspired him, her presence had given him purpose, and together they had created a space of hope and safety for others. He understood that life was a series of challenges and lessons, but that facing them with compassion and determination could lead to profound change. As the fire crackled and the desert night stretched endlessly, John felt a sense of peace he had never known. The obstacles they had faced had tested him, but they had also strengthened him. Aida had been a guide, a partner, and a source of inspiration, and together they had learned that life's greatest rewards often came from helping others and staying true to one's values. In the quiet of that night, John made a silent promise to continue this path, no matter what challenges lay ahead. The ranch, the travelers, and the work they had begun together were now part of a larger mission, one of compassion, courage, and transformation. And with Aida by his side, he knew that they could face whatever the future held together. The desert was vast and sometimes harsh, but within the walls of their cabin and the spaces they created around the ranch, warmth, hope, and resilience thrived. They had learned that life could be difficult, that challenges were inevitable, but that the way they responded, through courage, empathy, and persistence, defined the impact they could make on the world. John and Aida had grown not just in skill and confidence, but in understanding and connection. Their shared journey had taught them that life's most meaningful moments often arise from overcoming challenges, facing fear with bravery, and supporting one another through uncertainty. And as they looked ahead, they understood that their work, their friendship, and their shared purpose would continue to shape their lives in ways they could not yet imagine. Time passed at the ranch, and life had slowly transformed into something richer, fuller, and far more meaningful than John had ever imagined. The small cabin that once held only silence now echoed with laughter, conversation, and the quiet hum of activity. Travelers and neighbors alike came and went, sharing their stories, seeking help, and leaving with gratitude in their hearts. John looked around one evening as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the desert in warm, golden light, and he felt a profound sense of fulfillment. Aida had become an essential part of this transformation. She moved through the ranch with quiet confidence, her presence offering comfort to those who were weary or afraid. She helped new visitors find their way, shared her knowledge, and most importantly, reminded everyone she met that courage and kindness could change lives. John watched her often, marveling at the strength and grace she displayed, remembering the night she had first arrived, shivering, tired, and fearful. That same young woman now radiated resilience and hope, and he felt honored to witness her growth. Despite the successes and small victories, challenges continued to arise. Some travelers arrived with distrust in their eyes, unsure if John and Aida could be trusted. Occasionally, neighbors still cast doubtful glances, questioning the pair's intentions. But John and Aida faced these challenges together, patient and unwavering in their commitment to help. Over time, even the skeptics began to see the sincerity and care that defined the ranch. Little by little, the community began to change, learning that acts of kindness could inspire trust and connection. One day, a group of villagers arrived with news of a nearby family in desperate need. Their home had been damaged in a sudden storm, and they had nowhere else to turn. John and Aida immediately sprang into action, gathering supplies, organizing volunteers, and traveling with the villagers to assist the family. For hours they worked under the hot sun, repairing walls, securing roofs, and carrying water and food. Each task was exhausting, yet every effort was filled with purpose. Aida moved among the workers, encouraging them, guiding them, and sharing her knowledge with everyone she could. By evening, the family's home was secure, and their relief was evident. The gratitude in their eyes reminded John and Aida of why they had undertaken this path. It was not about recognition or reward. It was about making a tangible difference, no matter how small it seemed. That night, as they returned to the ranch, John realized how much he had changed. He had become someone willing to step beyond his comfort zone, to embrace uncertainty, and to act with compassion. Aida had been his guide in this journey, teaching him not just to help, but to see the humanity in every person they encountered. As days turned into weeks, their work became a rhythm. Mornings were spent tending the ranch, assisting visitors, and organizing tasks. Afternoons were filled with learning and teaching. John shared practical skills with those who needed them, while Aida shared stories, wisdom, and lessons in courage. Evenings were moments of reflection, when the desert stretched endlessly before them, and they could pause to consider the impact of their efforts. One night, sitting by the fire after a long day, Aida spoke softly, "Do you remember the first night I came here?" John smiled, leaning back against the wall of the cabin. "I do. I remember you standing at the door, shivering, scared, and unsure if anyone would help." Aida nodded, her eyes reflecting the firelight. "I was afraid," she said. "I didn't know if I would survive the journey here. But you gave me hope. That night changed everything for me." John reached out, placing a hand on hers. "It changed me too. I had been living alone, thinking life was only about work and survival. But you showed me that life is also about connection, compassion, and helping others. You reminded me what it means to care." There was a quiet understanding between them, a recognition of how much they had influenced each other's lives. Their journey together had been one of growth, not only in their abilities or skills but in their hearts and minds. They had faced fear, uncertainty, and challenges, yet had emerged stronger, wiser, and more connected to the world around them. As the months went by, the ranch became a symbol of hope in the region. Word spread of a place where anyone in need could find shelter, guidance, and understanding. Families who had once struggled alone now found support. Travelers who had felt lost discovered kindness and encouragement. And John and Aida, once strangers united by chance, became pillars of a small but growing community. Through it all, they never lost sight of the lessons they had learned. Life was unpredictable, often challenging, and sometimes unfair. But courage, empathy, and kindness had the power to create change. Aida's strength had inspired John, and John's support had given Aida a foundation from which to grow. Together, they had discovered the beauty of shared purpose and mutual trust. One evening, after a particularly long day of helping a family rebuild their home, John and Aida sat outside, watching the stars appear in the darkening sky. The desert was calm, the air cool and still. Aida leaned back, taking a deep breath, and spoke quietly. "I never thought I would feel this at home," she said. "After everything I went through, I didn't know if I could trust anyone, if I could feel safe again. But here, I do. I feel hope and I feel like I belong." John looked at her, his eyes soft with understanding. "You do belong," he said, "and not just here but in the world. You have shown everyone that courage and compassion matter. You've changed more lives than you can imagine, including mine." Aida smiled, her expression calm and peaceful. "And you've changed mine," she replied. "You gave me shelter, yes, but also guidance and support. You showed me that life could be better, that kindness exists even when it seems rare. You reminded me that I can face the world without fear." As they sat together, the firelight flickering on their faces, John realized that the journey they had shared was a gift. What had started as a chance meeting on a cold night had grown into something profound. They had learned from each other, grown stronger together, and created a space where others could find hope and courage. The desert, vast and quiet, seemed to stretch endlessly before them, but within the boundaries of their ranch, life was vibrant, filled with learning, growth, and compassion. They had faced countless challenges, yet they had emerged stronger, their lives intertwined in a bond that was unbreakable. John thought about the first night, when a young woman with a torn cloth and frightened eyes had knocked on his door. That night had set in motion a chain of events that transformed both their lives. It had shown him the power of kindness, the importance of courage, and the profound impact of human connection. And it had shown Aida that hope and safety were possible, even after the darkest of journeys. Together, they had built something lasting. The ranch was no longer just a place to live. It was a sanctuary, a beacon of hope, and a reminder that compassion can change the world in ways no one expects. John and Aida had discovered that life's true richness comes not from what we accumulate, but from the lives we touch and the difference we make. As the stars glittered above the desert and the night settled quietly around them, John and Aida knew that their journey was far from over. There would always be challenges, new people in need, and obstacles to face, but they were ready. They had each other, they had hope, and they had learned that even in the harshest circumstances, courage, compassion, and kindness could transform lives. And so, the ranch continued to thrive, filled with warmth, laughter, and hope. John and Aida's lives were forever changed by that single, unexpected night when a young woman asked for shelter. That night had sparked a journey of growth, connection, and transformation, one that would continue to touch the lives of many for years to come. In the quiet of the desert night, with the fire crackling and the stars shining brightly, John and Aida sat together, knowing that life's greatest gift is not in what we receive, but in what we give. and they had given, and would continue to give, everything they had to help others, inspire hope, and make the world a better place.